Ladies and gentlemen, in this RedGaming.com video, we have an awful lot of news coming out from AMD. Some of it is going to be console focused, primarily that the next generation consoles are going to be absolutely monsters. The performance is going to be absolutely out through the roof. We'll get into that in just a second. And the fact that AMD are promising great things for the GCN GPUs next year. There's going to be 2 brand new GCN GPUs in 2016, and they're going to be focusing on the discrete GPU market in both 2016 and 17. But first of all, we're going to be discussing the GPU side of things, and this comes via WCCF Tech, which are citing some sources from inside of AMD. So, just for a bit of background, I'm sure most of you are aware of this anyway, but I don't want to leave anyone behind. So, essentially, an APU, which is what AMD provide for the console, is a processor, a CPU, a GPU, along with other components all squeezed together on pretty much the same die. So in the Xbox One's case, that would mean the ESRAM, the GPU, the memory, and that is basically what an APU is. Now AMD are pretty aggressive in their pursuit of APUs. In the case of the PlayStation 4, for the sake of argument, it is using, of course, the AMD Jaguar. That's 8 CPU cores, that's 2 4-core modules, just so you're clear, and 1150. That comes courtesy of 18 GCN units, compute units, that's CUs, which means an awful lot of computing power, at least for consoles. You're looking at about 1.84 teraflops. But as we all know, next generation performance is going to be considerably higher, and one of the reasons behind this is virtual reality. Now, to give you an indication, these rumours are indicating at least that next generation consoles are going to have 5 times the performance per watt, and once again they will be expected in some point in 2018. Remember, next generation consoles are powerful. I guess current generation consoles, they are powerful, but they are pretty they're just way behind what is needed to power, say, the Oculus Rift. The standard Oculus Rift headset runs at 2160 by 1200 at 90 frames per second. That's a lot of performance. Now, furthermore, AMD are naturally not just in the business of APUs, CPUs and GPUs, they've got their fingers in a lot of software development. One of those is Liquid VR. Now, Liquid VR handles multiple different things using the GCN architecture. One of those is reducing latency, making it easier for developers to handle various VR effects, warping even. So it's going to be kind of now interesting and how all of that plays together. So, other rumours which popped up just a while back is that a PS4, I guess you could say, increased, more powerful, super duper PS4, PS4 4.1 or PS4 Ultra or whatever the hell you want to call it, is potentially in the works. That's according to the senior vice president of Sony, and this was back a while back, a 4-game interview. Now, we don't really know if that's going to really happen or not. We do naturally understand that because APUs and process sizes are going to shrink, it could just be that it's going to be more energy efficient. In other words, a slimline PS4. Not that the PS4 is particularly massive anyway, but we don't really know naturally what the future is going to hold, and it would be rather curious on how games would handle on both systems. I guess it's potentially possible that the Ultra PS4, for lack of a better way of a better name for it, could simply run games at potentially a higher resolution or better quality, and the regular common or garden PS4 that you and I probably have now will run them at lower resolution or maybe inferior shadow detail or lower texture quality, what have you. Obviously, I don't think Sony will want this situation where you would be unable to run a game on a regular PS4, because that would piss off a lot of customers. But we just don't know at this point what's going to happen. Now, switching to the GPU side of things, and this would obviously be discrete GPUs, which would be the GPUs that you would plug into your regular everyday desktop. At the moment, they are on 28nm, as you're all aware, but they are going to be shifting to a smaller, more energy efficient FinFET process by next year. Rajaj Kodori. I've just pronounced his name terribly, but you may recall he is the head of the newly formed Radeon Technologies group. He was recently discussing things with Forbes, and it was a bit of a brief chat, but what he said is that AMD are really super duper serious guys regarding the discrete GPU market, and they are going to be placing a lot of emphasis on high performance, low power based solutions. Now we all know of course that the next generation GPUs are coming out at some point next year, and we do naturally understand that the transistor count, the performance levels are going to skyrocket. For example, next year supposedly AMD are going to be releasing HBM2 memory architecture, which is going to be putting about 1 terabyte per second of memory bandwidth and up to 32 gigabytes of VRAM with 18 billion transistors for the top of the line super duper Arctic Island powered GPUs. That is absolutely monstrous. I mean, just really think about it. That is absolutely crazy. It's fair to say that the next generation GCN architectures are going to make their ways into the APU eventually as well, and primarily these GPUs, as one can imagine, is based and created for virtual reality. Obviously AMD and Nvidia are putting an awful lot of time, money and resources into virtual reality, and I keep talking about virtual reality because it is quite really honestly the buzzword. Just as HD was back in, let's say, mid 2000s, what the hell? Yeah, like 2005, 2006, 2007, everyone had HD on their mind because it was like I guess you could say the successor. Now obviously for PC folks, we've had high definition for some time. Like even back in like 2000, for the sake of argument, you could run games in 1600 by 1200, which admittedly isn't full HD resolution, but still you get the idea. But now virtual reality is going to start becoming the norm, and obviously Sony are working on it with PlayStation VR, but it's fair to say that in terms of the time frames, if once again AMD are being honest, well, more to the point, this source being honest, it's not AMD that are saying this, I just want to clarify, it is the source within AMD supposedly. If this is true, the chips will be happening at 2018, so that's fair to say that the next generation consoles will land in 2018. Now, I'm probably going to get some complaining in the old comments here, but let's be honest. At this point, 2015, the consoles have been out for around 2 years. In my honest opinion, 2018 is about as long as I would like the consoles to last. I don't want them to last any longer than that. If I had my way, to be honest, I'd prefer 2017, but 2018 I think is long enough. There are some games that look visually impressive, like I've been playing Tomb Raider today on the Xbox One, and it is bloody visually impressive, but you can just see that at points, for example, you've got aliasing, or you've got low resolution textures, or what have you, or maybe some pop-in, and it's not that the game doesn't look amazing, it really does. It looks jaw-dropping, not draw-dropping, there you got the idea. It looks bloody nice, but you do think to yourself, yeah, this could look better. It really could. Like, you think to yourself, you know, if it had more GPU resources, or more CPU resources, or more memory, you do think that. And console manufacturers in this really weird position now, because let's be honest, 2015 PCs are way in front of consoles. They are. That's just fact. But next year, 2016 to 2017, it's going to be ludicrous. Consoles are going to be so far behind, and especially with virtual reality does take off, which I imagine many console manufacturers are wondering. Like, I don't know if Nintendo are, but you've got to believe that Microsoft and Sony are both putting a lot of thought into what happens if virtual reality on PC becomes the de facto way to play. And this was the state of flux back in like 99, 2000, where the PlayStation 1 was being decimated by PCs visually, and of course back then consoles weren't able to go online either, so you had the whole online element, which is why PCs really just blew up. because consoles didn't have the online stuff. I mean, technically the Dreamcast did, and there were some other consoles. Technically, you know, some of the old Sega consoles and even some Nintendo consoles could technically go online, but it's not exactly a smooth, honest experience. The PlayStation 2 could go online, but it was a sucky experience. The original Xbox could go online, and it was not a sucky experience, but obviously at that point it was still really early days, and it wasn't really anywhere near the experience of Xbox Live as is. What I'm trying to tell you is that they don't want to be in a position where virtual reality is really only accessible via a PC. But naturally, it's not just virtual reality. 4K is a thing now. I mean, look at the price. Go ahead. I'll wait for a second. Yeah, you've looked at the price of a 4K TV. Look how cheap they are comparatively to what they were, let's say, 2 years ago. And 1080p TVs, they're almost bloody free, I swear to God. I'm pretty sure next time I go into Tesco to buy myself a thing of chicken, they're just going to say, oh sir, you've got like 50 cents, 50p off your next purchase, plus as well, here's a free TV. I mean, honestly, they're so cheap now, 1080p TVs, and we're not talking like a piddly little size either. We're talking like 30, 40, 50-inch TVs are cheap, with even good colour quality from Sony or LG or any of these larger companies. They're cheap. My point being that in a couple of years' time, 1-2 years' time, 4K TVs, 4K displays are going to be even cheaper. So let's be totally blunt here. By that point, it's going to be really hard for the average person to say, well, I'm happy at 720p or 900p, and resolution is going to have to start dropping for improvements in other areas. You've got that sacrifice. It's like with consoles, you can do efficiency improvements. This is what I was saying a couple of days ago. There's multiple ways you can improve the visual fidelity of your engine or your game. One is simple, you bump up the hardware performance, or two, you make efficiency improvements. So this can either be from the developer, which obviously makes the engine more efficient, improves the code, or from Sony or Microsoft as they improve the SDK, as they improve the system's drivers, that type of thing. There's only so much tweaking you can do. So what I'm basically saying is, I think at that point, with how relatively simple the architectures are for these systems, and they are relatively simple, at least in comparison to, say, the PlayStation 3 Cell, which was an absolute monster but rather difficult to utilise fully, I personally believe that 2017-18 is a pretty good point to say, you know what, we're going to be having a new shiny system. Now obviously 2018 is not the date for Nintendo, and what the date for Nintendo is still up in the air. We assume it's going to be next year, but it could fall to 2017, we just don't know. I'm hoping, however, that it will be a fairly monstrous system for multiple reasons. I think that the industry would probably benefit if Nintendo were on top for a while. And I'm not saying that in terms of Sony must lose or Microsoft must lose, but I think the industry as a whole, you know, it probably would benefit. I think Sony would benefit, Microsoft would benefit, and maybe gamers would benefit from Nintendo not necessarily decimating the competition, but from really being a rival for the hardcore demographic, to actually rival them in performance and hardware, so that we can actually see what happens. Like, let's say Nintendo released a system at, like, let's say 50% more powerful than the PlayStation 4, for sake of argument, and they've got, let's say, 2 years before the PlayStation 5 come out. I think it would be really interesting and good for the industry, and it would also, from my point of view, as someone who likes to watch the industry and make predictions and kind of just guess of what's going to happen, I think it would be very interesting to see if the hardcore demographic, the gaming demographic, would then move to Nintendo for that reason. Remember, performance, hardware is great, but sometimes that's not what you need to build your audience. But with all of that said, I've said many different words, but I think that's about it for this particular video. It's been a good one. 2018, eh? Well, if it's true, fantastic. But for now, take care and have a great night. Bye.